This is the Dallas Morning News.
The presenting sponsor for the Intersections podcast is Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman. Built on a culture of winning, these trial lawyers have proven experience, elite preparation, and relentless focus in the areas of commercial, intellectual property, and employment litigation. Visit Lynn LLP to learn more. And thank you so much to the Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman Group for all you're doing to support the Intersections podcast. This episode is brought to you in partnership by Clay Cooley Automotive, family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years. Clay, thank you for all you're doing to make Intersections possible.
Dale Petroskey, really a fascinating interview. White House, Baseball Hall of Fame, National Geographic, and chair of the Dallas Chamber. We tried to tie all those together.
Yeah, I don't know how they all tie together, but it's an incredible life history. He's done and seen a lot, from 10 weekends at Camp David with the Reagans, all the way to executive vice president of the Texas Rangers and then leading the Dallas Regional Chamber. He has seen a lot, and I think what he spoke of so clearly was how to build relationships, how to nurture people, and ultimately how to go do your best in everything that you do. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, introduce our guest.
Dale Petroskey. Dale is a good friend, but more important than that, has a career that has spanned a lot of different areas. From government, involved in the White House, and we'll talk about that. He's been an executive at National Geographic. Key player in baseball. He headed up the Baseball Hall of Fame, as well as working here locally with the Texas Rangers. But then probably more important, and what we'll get into, is for 12 years led the Dallas Regional Chamber at arguably the high point of the Dallas Regional Chamber and the high point for this area. Now, we hope the next 20 years are going to be that, but he was. Dale, it's good to have you with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here, guys. Thanks.
Dale, I went through that real quick. And again, National Geographic, Texas Rangers, we're all over the board. What ties it all together?
I think the key for me is communications. You know, I was journalism major, Michigan State. So I think I've always been a pretty good communicator in every form. But also it's relationships and understanding people. I think I have a very good understanding of how to connect with people, how to connect dots. And I've always been interested in things that are interesting. You know, when I was graduating from high school as a 17-year-old, I had a beautiful girlfriend. Her name was Ann Grover. Okay, she's been my wife now for 47 years. And
I was hoping it was.
Yeah, no, we were going to get a transition.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. Some guys might do that, but not me. But I thought and people would say, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Yeah, there's two things I care about. I want to marry Ann Grover, and I want to take care of her. I want to have a great family. And number two, I want to lead an interesting life." And so I've had a lot of times in my life where people have come to me and offered me things. And maybe I was at National Geographic at the time, and maybe that was for more money, but it wasn't as interesting. But there's one time in my life when I had a real dilemma. I had been at National Geographic for 12 years, was in the top 5. I was the youngest of the top 5. I thought I had a shot someday to be president of National Geographic. And my buddy called me and said, "Dale, there's a job you need to have." And I said, "I already got the job I need to have." He said, "No, president of the Baseball Hall of Fame." So I was going down a path with a very interesting job, and I decided to get off that exit to go to a more interesting job at that moment in my life. So interesting jobs have always been of interest to me, and I think because of that, I've been very engaged in everything I've done, cared about it, learned about it, and knew how to connect dots, knew how to communicate.
Lord opens a lot of doors for us, but I'm not going to let you off the hook on one. You kind of identify 3 things. The middle one, I want you to be more specific on, because I think people always say relationships are important, and I build relationships.
Yeah.
Dive into that deeper. What does that mean to you? And really, what about you from a characteristic standpoint makes you good at developing relationships? What is it that you do from a tactical standpoint?
Yeah.
A little bit more on that.
So let me give you an example. When I was at the Dallas Regional Chamber, I would often meet with new CEOs who came to town. And I'd ask to have lunch with them. And we'd go out to lunch. And I'd say, listen, I've read all about you, kind of know all about you, but why don't you tell me in your own words about your life? And they'd start by saying, I graduated from Yale. And then I said, no. I said, you didn't come out of the womb graduating from Yale.
Who are you?
Tell me where you grew up. Who are your parents? What did they do for a living? Did you have siblings? What did you care about as a little kid? And by asking that question and resetting them back at the beginning, you can just unspool their entire life. And I would sit there literally for 45 minutes, not saying a word, just intently listening for what they really cared about, listening to some of their insecurities, listening to some of the things in their life that were life-changing, either in a positive way or a negative way. And by the end of that lunch, I knew exactly who that person was, so that I knew how I could connect with them going forward. Mm-hmm. And I knew that could be the one or two things. Might be golf, Tom, or it might be baseball, or it might be we both have families in northern Michigan. Whatever it was, I had a way to connect with them. And it made...
So just play it down until you find something.
It made life so much easier for me to do business with them, because these relationships were not transactional then. They became personal. Okay. And so that's the way I've always operated. And I think I have a natural interest in people. I think I'm a very active listener. I take a lot of notes, as you'll see, my note cards. And when I sit down for lunch with that CEO, I would say, do you mind if I take a couple notes? And I would take notes. Mm-hmm. And then the minute I left lunch, I'd go to my phone and I'd put in everything that I took notes on, so that I knew who that person was.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, now watch this. Okay, so Dale, what early on in your life made a difference? What set you up to be Dale Petroskey?
Well, I think part of it was the accident of birth. I was one of 9 children. I was the second oldest. I was the oldest son of 9 children. I was the oldest son of an oldest son. And I was the oldest grandson of 30. So maybe that had a little something to do with expectations. Although, to be honest with you, I never felt them. But
expectations in terms of being the patriarch of the family?
Well, not the patriarch, but the oldest, that wanted to set the example, all that kind of stuff. I never felt that externally. Like, my folks never put that on me. But I kind of felt like, okay, I'm the leader, I'm the oldest, I've got to do well. And I think that was sort of part of it. It's a little bit like Admiral McRaven. I asked him over lunch one day, I said, when did you become a leader? Why did you become a leader? He said, you know what? He said, I was average student, but I was a good athlete and I was tall. So they always made me the captain.
Sure.
So by being the captain, I became the leader. It's a little bit of the same thing for me, I think. But I had a wonderful growing up. One of 9 kids. I lived in a 1,300 square foot house until I was 16 years old.
Mm-hmm. So 1,300 divided by 11.
Yeah, exactly. That would
not a lot of space.
That would be like one corner of the homes in Highland Park. And we were bumping into each other all the time. And people might say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I say that's the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because today, the 9 of us, and now we have expanded families with spouses and kids, and we are each other's best friends. I mean, we are a family. We're a unit. We help each other. We do everything for each other. We do help each other's kids, help each other's friends, and I think it goes back to that 1,300 square foot house, to be honest with you.
So you mentioned earlier that at 17 you had these things you wanted to do. Well, I don't know a lot of 17-year-olds today that are saying they want to go get married, number one, but also have the foresight and the vision into their future life. What were the lessons or leadership ideals or things that grounded you that created that 17-year-old who was ready to take on the world?
Yeah, I think I came from a very stable home. My parents were high school sweethearts who married, loved each other. That was obvious. Cared about their kids, cared about their family. That was first for them. We were part of a bigger family, which was the Petroskey family, which was a big, loving family. And so I think that gave me the comfort and the stability to say, I'm going to have a stable, comfortable life with a family. Okay, not everybody has that at the beginning. The other thing was I was a good athlete. I was a captain of my high school football team. I made the team as a sophomore. Later became captain. I was a quarterback. I was a captain of my high school baseball team, made varsity as a sophomore, started as a sophomore, played on 2 national championship baseball teams growing up. And so I played with 2 guys who got drafted and played in the major leagues, Todd Cruz and Larry Sorensen. But the fact is that I had some success. And I think success begets success. And I think when you have success, you gain confidence. And so I think those were the things that kind of launched me to say, okay, I can do something here with this life.
But your undergraduate, as you said at Michigan State, was in journalism. You don't usually think of journalism and leadership necessarily in the same sentence. Now, journalism in terms of understanding, research, deep conveyance of communication, all those sorts of things, but you usually don't think of it as a route to leadership.
Yeah. I never thought of myself as that I was going to be a leader. I wanted to make a good enough living to take care of my family. I didn't know what that meant. If I was a reporter, that's the way I would do it. If I was a PR guy, that's the way I would do it. I never really thought I was going to be a CEO. And so, it just happened as time went on. And I think part of it, Tom, was going to Washington and working on Capitol Hill. And all of a sudden, an entire world opened up to me that I never knew in Michigan, which was there are a lot of smart people in this country from all over the place. And you're starting to learn from them. They have expertise in banking, or they have expertise in agriculture, or all these different subjects, education. And then you're starting to be around people on the Hill, like my boss, Congressman Bill Goodling of Pennsylvania, he was an apple farmer and a former superintendent of schools, but so down to earth and so caring. And he really was, he had been a coach, but he really was beyond a congressman. He was a teacher and a coach, and he coached me and he taught me. And I think I took so much from that while being around some pretty sophisticated and pretty able people that I probably wouldn't have been around if I hadn't gone to Washington. And then I end up in the White House, and then everything just ratchets up from there. And you start to see, oh, that's what leadership looks like, or that's what smart looks like, or that's how things get done in a professional way. And all of that, I think I stumbled into some of this, to be honest with you.
You mentioned Representative Goodling, and you said at one time that the 2 things he told you was work hard and be kind. That was the success.
Yeah. No question. And I think that's been my mantra my entire life now. And I tell my young staff, and I tell my own kids, I said, the only 2 things you need to do to be successful in your career is to work hard, work really hard, and be really nice. And what I say is this, and I don't mean 4 days out of 5. A lot of people can work hard 4 days out of 5. They just can't work hard that 5th day. A lot of people can be really nice 4 days out of 5. They just can't be nice that 5th day. And what do people remember?
That's a good point.
They remember the day you weren't nice. They remember the day you didn't work hard. So you lose opportunities because people say inconsistent. But if you work hard every day and you're really nice every day, that's consistency, and you develop your brand. And people say, that's the guy I want to be around. And in my entire career has been people tapping me on the shoulder saying, come with me, come with me, come with me. And the reason is I've always believed that you're auditioning for your next role every single day. When you're out there and you're in public, I don't care if you're in the grocery store, you are auditioning for your next role because you never know.
Absolutely.
Everybody's paying attention, and everybody's, kind of judging you.
Before Washington, though, you went from Michigan State and then went into politics.
Yep.
Assistant press secretary for the Republican caucus in Lansing.
So very different.
You went from
Republican
Lansing to
caucus
Lansing. You went from Lansing to Lansing.
Yeah.
Understand. But what was the attraction to go to politics?
Well,
Again, journalism, you'd think, go into more the mainstream type of journalism.
Funny story, and you guys know, and some of life is just serendipity, right? My last term at Michigan State, I only had 3 credits. Okay, I was an RA in the dorm, but I had 3 credits, and I was on a great softball team that we hoped was going to win the campus championship out of 500 teams. We lost in the championship game 3-2, unfortunately, but that was my goal, and I knew. So that was was graduating in June, getting married in October.
Okay.
So I needed a job.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't sophisticated enough to know you really have to hustle to get a job right now. I thought I'll get a job when I get a job. So my last term in school, I interned for United Press International at the state capitol building. Okay. And one day, as luck would have it, I'm walking down the hall in the Capitol, and Dave Mactell, who was the press secretary for that caucus, the House Republican caucus, said, Dale, psst, come over here. So he said, what are you doing after you graduate? And I said, no plans. He said, why don't you come work for me? He said, Gene, I forget Gene's last name, is leaving us. I need a good young guy. Why don't you join my team? And it was as simple as that. That's how I got into politics.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was really a reporter at the Capitol building. So I was in that environment, but I didn't plan to be in politics. I guess I was a little bit more right of center than left of center. And so it made sense that I would go to that caucus. And by the way, in those days, most Michigan Republicans were centrists, a little bit right of center. So it fit me. But I was doing press releases we had 40 members of the Republican caucus. There were 70 Democrats and 40 Republicans. That's how big in the minority we were. And I was doing press releases. We'd send them to their hometowns and their hometown papers. And we do radio actualities where we have the tape recorder and, interview them and cut it up and send it back to the radio stations. That's what I was doing. And then one day, let me back up here because this is an important point. Ann was working at the transportation department across from the Capitol. I was working in the Capitol. We worked one block away from each other. She started at 7:30. My office started at 9. And I'm newly married. I said, I'm not going to lay in bed. I'll get up with my new bride and we'll have breakfast and I'll walk her down to her office, drop her off, and I'll go in early. Well, nobody was in there at 7:30 except me, and I was only reading the paper, to be honest with you. One day, a 29-year-old state rep who was down the hall knocks on my door, said, Dale, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. He said, you're the hardest working guy here. You're always the first one in the office. He didn't know about Ann, and he didn't know I was just reading the paper. He said, listen, I've got something I want to talk to you about. I think Ronald Reagan's going to win the nomination. This is, by the way, 79.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Reagan's going to win the nomination. I think if he does, I think he's got a good shot of beating Carter in 80. He said if he beats Carter, he's going to take my congressman, David Stockman, from my district to be in his cabinet. He thought energy secretary at the time, but turned out to be budget director. So he's going to take Stockman into his cabinet, opens up that seat. I'm going to run for that seat. I want you to run my campaign.
Wow.
I'm like 25. I'd never run anything in my life, right? And I said, Mark, if all those dominoes fall, I'm in. Thinking there's no way all those dominoes are going to fall. And then they fall, right? So then I go down to Three Rivers. By the way, it's a special election because it's an open congressional seat. It's like, it was a sprint, not a marathon. So I get down there, really just tried to figure it out. I just knew that we were going to work hard. We're going to be organized. We're going to try to win this thing. We won by 181 votes. 100. I still got the slip of paper of the final vote count. There were 7 Republicans in the race. Stockman had picked his campaign chairman to be his successor. Stockman was riding the wave, as you remember, Tom. He was on the cover of every magazine, the Wonder Boy, for 34 years old, youngest cabinet secretary ever. So he picks John Globinski, his campaign chairman, to be his successor and anoints him. Globinski's a Harvard-educated lawyer from St. Joe, the richest part of the district. This district was 7 counties long, the southern border of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. And so he's the main candidate in that part of the district. A popular state senator is the candidate in the eastern part of the district. So we make a decision. We're going to lose this county, but we're going to finish second. We're going to lose this county, but we're going to finish second. And we're going to win all the little ones in between.
Second wins.
That's exactly what we did. And we won by 181 votes. That's how I get to Washington.
Okay. And when you got to Washington then, so you're chief of staff for the representative.
No, there's a period in there that I want to talk about. So I go, the guy's name was Mark Siljander, the congressman whose campaign I ran. Get there, I'm his press secretary on the Hill. And the office is a mess. I mean, he was a great candidate, but a less good congressman. He was there kind of to play. He's 29 years old, and he had a lot of people influencing him, and it just felt icky to me. I didn't feel like this is someplace I wanted to tie my reputation to. So we get there in April, and in November, the staff that had worked on the campaign is out having pizza and beer on a Friday night. And they're all bitching about the office and how it's run or not being run. And I'm quiet. Now, I was the highest ranking person at the table, and I was the campaign manager. And they look at me and they say, "Dale, you're being awfully quiet." I said, "You know why? If I take a paycheck from somebody, they sign my check, I got no right to bitch about them. If you guys hate it this much, then quit." And by saying those words out loud, I told myself, I'm quitting. I just told myself I'm quitting. I go home to Ann on a Friday night. I said, I'm quitting on Monday. And she said, "What? Like, we don't have any job. I don't have a job. You won't have a job. We're in Washington. We don't know anybody." I said, "We'll figure it out." So that's what happened. And so now I gave 2-week notice. And on November 20th, just before Thanksgiving, it became effective that I was out of a job. I sent Ann home to Michigan to be with our families for Thanksgiving while I stayed back in Washington looking for a job because I needed a job. And so I'm walking the halls of Congress on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and I run into a guy I worked on the campaign with, Mike Ridenauer from South Bend, Indiana, went to Notre Dame. And he said, "Dale, I heard you quit Siljander." I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "You know of anything?" He said, "Only thing I know is that Bill Goodling's looking for a chief of staff, but that's way out of your league. You know, you've only been here 6 months. You're way too young, but that's all I know." Went right to the bookstore because there was no phones to look anything up. Got the Almanac of American Politics, which is sort of the Bible for every district in the country. Looked up his district, looked up about him, looked up about the makeup of the district, and put together my resume over the weekend on an old Hunt and Peck typewriter, turned it in on Monday morning after Thanksgiving, never expecting to hear from him. And the next day I got a call saying, "Congressman wants to see you." I thought, really? So on Thursday, I went in, and what I began to realize very early on was that yes, he was a congressman, but really he was a coach. He was a teacher and a coach, and he had a safe district. His dad had been the congressman before him. He'd been there for 10 years. He never had a tough reelection, and he was bored. He wanted a project, and he saw in me a project.
That's right.
He saw in me a young quarterback that with some potential that he could mold. And he told me, "Dale, I know this is crazy. I'm going to hire you. Don't worry what you don't know. I'm going to teach you."
Let's talk water. Water is one of the most basic inputs in daily life and one of the least examined. Most people don't know what's actually coming out of their tap. In cities across the country, including Dallas, municipal water can contain elements like chlorine, lead, PFAS, and nitrates. These are measurable compounds, and ongoing research continues to explore their potential impact on long-term health. At a minimum, it raises a reasonable question. What's actually coming through the tap in your home? Dallas Water Doctor is a local DFW company focused on answering that question. They test water at the home level, explain the results clearly, and recommend solutions based on what's actually needed. Whether that's reverse osmosis, whole home water filtration, or something more targeted, they take care of all of it. To learn more, visit dallaswaterdoctor.com/intersections and mention the Intersections podcast for $200 off any filtration solution. Again, that's dallaswaterdoctor.com/intersections. Thank you to the Dallas Water Doctor team for everything you do to support the Intersections podcast.
Between taxes, the unpredictable nature of markets, legislation changes, and so many other variables, your financial plan may feel like it is often under attack. That's why your financial planning team should operate like a battleship where everyone is working hard to accomplish the ship's mission. Too many wealth management teams operate like a cruise ship, catering to the masses, chasing fads, and not truly setting their sights on the long-term destination. If you want confidence that your current financial plan is a battleship that is going to get you long-term results, Reach out to Caleb Williams and his team at Roundtable Associates. They offer wealth management solutions and fiduciary advice with a clear and straightforward fee structure. Roundtable Associates, plan purposely, live abundantly. Thank you, Caleb Williams and team, for everything you're doing to support the Intersections podcast.
You mentioned somebody came up to you in the halls of the Michigan legislature and said, do you want to join me as assistant press secretary?
Yeah.
You had a similar conversation, but it was in Washington. Larry Speaks was the press secretary for President Reagan.
Right.
He approached you. Why did he approach you, and give us the circumstances of how you ended up at the White House as assistant press secretary?
Crazy story. Congressman Goodling every year had a big dinner in his district where he brought a big Washington name in. And it wasn't to raise money. It was for his college internship program. It's to raise money for his college internship program. In 1982, he invited Larry Speaks to be the headliner. And so the dinner is coming up, by the way, York, Pennsylvania is 100 miles north of Washington. It's drivable. Congressman says to me in the morning, Dale, I can't make it back down to Washington to fly up with you and Larry, so just fly with him and then make sure he's taken care of at the dinner and then fly home with him. Well, this is all brand new to me, this White House stuff. So we go out to Andrews Air Force Base, and apparently the White House has a fleet of little jets, four-seat jets that they can use to go around the country. So I hop in with Larry, and literally we're a few feet from each other. And we're flying up to York, and I'm asking him all about his life. I watch you on TV, but how do you prepare for that? How does that happen? What's this reporter like? And I was interested. And he was interested. He was asking me a little bit about what's going on the Hill. Then we talked baseball. And it was like nothing else mattered. He loved baseball. I love baseball. And we were like brothers all of a sudden. So we go up, I show him around, we have a good time, we fly back. Now we're close. After, half hour together, right? We get back, I write him a nice note, how much fun I had. I hope I can stay in touch with him. He writes me a beautiful note. And then 2 years later, I'm sitting in my office on Capitol Hill, just doing my job on a Tuesday in March, and the phone rings. And my assistant says, Dale, I got Larry Speaks on the line. And he gets on, he says, Dale, I know you're busy. How you been? He said, always remember our night together going to Pennsylvania and back. He said, I came back and told my team the next guy we're hiring is that guy. And he said, how would you like to come work for the president and me? And it was about relationships. Yeah. It was about understanding how to connect,
So now you're there.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the West Wing. What was life like?
West Wing, Tom's been there many times. He was a White House fellow, so he knows. It's very small. The ceilings are low. The corridors are narrow. The show, The West, somebody just asked me the other day about what is the show, The West Wing.
There's nothing to do.
Yeah. I say some of it is very similar. Some of it's not very similar. But I mean, the pace is kind of similar. Mm-hmm. People are moving fast, all that kind of stuff. But it was really cool. I was 50 feet from the Oval Office. Mm-hmm. So I saw the president every day in public settings. We had press opportunities and trips and all that kind of stuff. But I got to know him pretty well on top of that through some other circumstances.
So what were those? I mean, you had 10 trips with he and Nancy to Camp David.
Yeah.
That's an unusual situation.
Now, I'll tell you how that happened. If as long as we're talking about the craziness of life and how things happen. So in the White House, the Reagans loved to go to Camp David every weekend. That was their respite. That was their little oasis away from Washington. And they'd ride horses and they'd walk in the woods together. It was very peaceful. And so we had a guy on our staff named Mark Weinberg, who was from Cleveland, Ohio, and sharp young guy, but he didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have a wife, but he loved being with the Reagans. That was his thing, to be close to the Reagans. So Larry would send him to be the press assistant with the Reagans to Camp David every weekend so that the rest of us could get on with our lives and have a weekend, Well, Mark was a bit of a smart aleck. And he said something that got back to the chief of staff, Don Reagan. And Reagan said, "You're fired. You're fired." And Larry said, "Wait a minute, Don, we can't fire Mark, And it was just at the time when the Challenger had blown up, okay, when the 7 astronauts.
January of 86.
Yeah,
right?
January of 86. And Krista McAuliffe was the teacher going into space and so forth. And so Larry said, Don, let's do this. Let's send Mark over to do the press on the Challenger for several months. Let's cool off here a little bit, and then we'll get him back after that. It was a cooling off period for Mark. So it's Thursday that week, and I'm in my office, and Larry buzzes me. He said, come up and see me. And he said, Dale, Mark is not going to be going to Camp David for a while. He said, I want you to go. Me? Why me? Kind of thing. So the next day, Friday, 3:00 comes around, Marine One, the helicopter's on the south grounds. I walk out with the Reagans. We lift off. 45 minutes later, we drop down to the Catoctin Mountains in Camp David, which is an incredible experience. And they invited us into, there were 5 staffers that traveled with him. It was the White House communications person. It was that really sends the message out to the world if we're at war. It's the military aide. It's his doctor. It's the press assistant and his personal assistant. Those are the 5 roles that go with the president to Camp David. And so I was the press assistant. And so I go up there, watch movies in their home on Friday night and Saturday night, come home, tell Ann that was an incredible experience. Check that off the list. I'll never do that again. And Monday afternoon, Larry calls me up again. He says, come up and see me. And I thought, what did I do? He said, well, you must have passed the test because the Reagans want you to go from now on until Mark comes back. So we got 10 weeks. And by the way, you can bring Ann from now on. So we got 10 weekends with the Reagans at Camp David in a very intimate setting where you really got to spend some time with them and get to know them, and they got to know you. And subsequently.
So what did you see about the president? That other people were distanced from him on the staff, or just the couple in Des Moines would not have known about him or would not have appreciated about him?
I would say that people have this notion of Ronald Reagan that he was more outgoing than he really was. He was a pretty quiet guy, very, very respectful of everyone. I mean, that was the way he was raised. Despite his fame, despite being great on stage, when you were with him alone, you were the one initiating the conversation. And, that's hard to do because usually you're taught don't speak unless spoken to. But he was open to that because he was just so down to earth. And I'll give you one example. So we'd watched a movie on a Saturday night, and for some reason, and we always critique the movies right afterwards. We stood around and critiqued the movies. And of course, they love movies because they came from Hollywood. And so we saw the movie The Money Pit, Shelley Long and Tom Hanks. And for some reason, none of us thought it was very funny. And so the president was trying to get something out of us. And he says, well, if nobody wants to say anything, I'll say something. That was terrible. And he said, listen, Nancy and I, we just take recommendations from our friends about what we might want to see. But if you guys have ideas, what you'd like to see, let us know. I was standing right next to him. I said, Mr. President, I love baseball. He said, I know. I said, I would love to see you in playing Grover Cleveland Alexander in the Spirit of St. Louis. He said, you would? So he started talking about this scene with Cookie Lavagetto and Bob Lemon and how they shot it. And so the next weekend, I'm back in Michigan for my sister's wedding. And Larry sent Rusty Brashear up to Camp David that weekend. So I called Rusty at Camp David. I said, Rusty, how's it going? He says, oh, it's awesome. I said, what'd you see last night? He said, we saw the winning team. And the president said, I got this for Dale. Where is he? So I didn't get a chance to watch it with him, but it was, but that's the kind of guy he was.
Okay. Let's flip that though. I think it was Tip O'Neill, others, but Tip O'Neill reinforced the phrase, the great communicator.
Yeah.
Probably more effective in front of television, arguably with John F. Kennedy, but effective in front of television and developing that. And again, as you said, he was a movie actor, did a lot of commercials, so he was in front of the camera a lot. But what, when you were close to him, made him such a good communicator that he could really connect with the American people?
Yeah. Part of it, I think, was his voice, to be honest with you. I mean, he was a radio announcer before he was before he was an actor and before he was on
Actually,
TV
he
a
did
lot.
baseball games way back when he was reading the ticker, not even at the game.
Yes, very good.
But trying to convince people.
For the Cubs. He was in Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines, Iowa, exactly.
And WHO, doing the Cubs games, recreating the games. But he had this silky voice, I think, which really comforted people, to be honest with you. And he had a great way of being folksy and a bit, what's the word, informal, while being still regal. I mean, it's a hard balance to meet, being authoritative but informal, and with this silky voice. And I think that had a lot to do with it. And the guy who really understood him and I think made him as effective as he was Mike Deaver. So Deaver, you guys talked about this before. Yeah. Deaver was the genius, the advertising genius who came from California with him, and knew him very, very well, understood him, and understood, by the way Americans were receiving their information. And so our game plan was simply this, because we knew how effective he was on TV. There might be 5 events that day. Well, we allowed the press to cover one. Okay. And in that one event that the cameras would be on, we dropped the line in there that they had to cover, which was an issue that we cared about. It might have been taxes. It might have been a foreign policy thing. It might have been, the
issue of the day.
Whatever the issue of the day was. And Deaver understood that there were 4 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, and the brand new CNN. He understood that there were really only a couple newspapers that mattered: Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the brand new USA Today, but the wires mattered a lot. And as they were traveling with the president, they had to, that was the line, that was the news of the day that they had to cover. So all Americans at that time, probably 300 million Americans, were all receiving the same message every single day. The message that the president wanted to get out there. And I think that was really made for an effective and organized, agenda for the president.
You laid out, Dale, as it was back then, a very organized approach. Today, however, mainstream media basically out of the game. You've got 24/7 content, which of course was never the situation with the 4 major networks. In addition to that, you've got a whole host of different, what we'll call periphery type of communication vehicles too. Do a compare and contrast of what it would be like to be in the press secretary, the communications office of the White House today versus back then. What are the challenges today?
I don't know how they do it, to be honest with you. I think I think this leads them to play to their base, and not play to the American public necessarily. I think the 2 things that are connected are gerrymandering and social media today. And what I mean by that is when you hand the pencils to the guys who have the offices and say, draw these districts, they're going to draw the safest districts they can. Okay. So that leads to, only the most extreme on both sides will win those seats. Well, then now that you've got a media that's not advertising based, but subscription based, it is thin sliced. And those media people know exactly who they're going after.
And by what you're talking about there is old model was advertising. So if I want Ford to advertise in my paper, I've got to be kind of in the middle. I can't be too far off because Ford not going to want me. But if it's subscription, then what I really have is a group of people that want to pay me and they want to hear what they want to hear.
Yeah. And I think, but the other part of that, Tom, is that with an advertising base, you're appealing to the general public.
Right.
And
Ford wants to sell cars to Democrats and Republicans.
Exactly. And in this way, now the way we do it is people tune into what they want to tune into. And generally they tune into, hear people who think the way they think.
Yeah. New York Times and Fox News are exactly the same. They just go at it a different side
sides.
of the spectrum.
They're just different. And these and the gerrymandered people from these, the voters, they're going to go to the people. They don't want to hear the other side. They want to hear their own side. And I think it's very dangerous. And by the way, I think the other part of it is the editing process is just out the window. I mean, in the old days, New York Times, Washington Post, think about what you may. They went through a lot of edits so that it was accurate, it was right, and it was verified.
Why did we lose that?
Yeah, because it was so easy. Because they were becoming less relevant,
it's money. It is money. It goes back to that. It's the way I make money today, and the only way I can survive.
Sure.
I think it's Washington Post failed, New York Times succeeded. They were both to the left. One played it much better than the other, and then you look at a success like Fox News and compare that to anything in the middle.
Sure.
Dale, you had a lot of great experiences there, but there's two that I want you to focus in on and talk about. You were privileged to join the president in two different meetings with Gorbachev. I want to talk about the second one, but the first one was a key one. That was in Washington.
First one was in Geneva.
Geneva, but I'm talking about when he came to Washington too. Talk about those meetings with Gorbachev and how those played off. And Reagan really came out the big winner in every single meeting he had with Gorbachev.
Yeah. First of all, I was shocked that we were going to meet with Gorbachev because the language had always been, the evil empire. But there was a method to that. And that was the president wanted to be in a position of strength before he met with Gorbachev. So if you think about it, he wins 49 states in 1984. Now, the first meeting with Gorbachev is in the fall of 85.
Yep.
So he's politically strong. The economy is going gangbusters. We're stronger than we've ever been. So when he goes to the table, he's going to the table from a position of strength. Gorbachev is the new leader in the Soviet Union. In Reagan's first term, 3 guys died. Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernyenko all died. Old men. And now comes a 52-year-old, Gorbachev, who was talking about glasnost and perestroika.
Which is probably the only reason he had the opportunity, because 3 old people died.
Exactly.
They couldn't afford a fourth.
Exactly right, Tom. And so, and we got word back from our embassy and our, the folks who follow this stuff. This is a guy we can do business with. So Reagan thought, perfect timing. I'm at my highest strength, and we got a new guy who wants to talk. And so that's how it happened. Still, I was shocked when the word came out that we were going to go do this. And then so much of history, as you know, is serendipitous. It comes down to the flip of a coin. Who's going to host the first meeting? Is it going to be Gorbachev or is it going to be Reagan? Reagan wins the flip. So he's the guy who comes down the steps to greet Gorbachev. Otherwise, it would have been Gorbachev inside waiting for Reagan to come. So Reagan, tall, handsome Ronald Reagan, comes down the steps, and around the corner comes this Soviet limousine, and out comes Gorbachev in a hat, fedora. He was all bundled up in a coat.
We got to go back to that. So it's a cold, freezing day.
Yes.
And when the president walked down, he did not have an overcoat.
Yeah.
He intentionally only wore his suit. And so when he got out, go ahead, Dale, but that was the contrast.
Yeah.
That was the picture of the entire meeting.
Thank you for setting that context. I mean, let me tell you one more story around it. Jim Kuhn was his personal assistant, and Kuhn was in the meetings with Gorbachev because he's always with the president. And then the president put his overcoat on to get ready to walk out. And Jim turned to him and said, "Mr. President, you're not going to wear that coat, are you?" He said, "Yeah, it's cold out there." He said, "I wouldn't do it, Mr. President." And Jim was an old press advanced guy. He understood pictures. Yeah. He got it. And President says, they had a little bit of a back and forth. And Jim said, "I wouldn't do it, Mr. President." Finally, the president takes it off, throws it down and says, "Okay." So it became the picture. And there he was, beautiful Ronald Reagan, not worried about the cold. And Gorbachev's all bundled up.
Well, and 70 plus in 52.
Yeah.
So,
And Reagan's like 6'2", and Gorbachev's like 5'9". And Reagan just gently, guides him up the steps. But the contrast couldn't. Reagan won that.
guides him up like it's his grandfather.
Yeah.
Okay,
Reagan won
jump
the
to
PR war.
Reykjavik then.
Yeah, go to really the fall.
Arguably, this was the most consequential meeting. In some ways, take World War II out, but of the century. Because most people would say that is the meeting in Reykjavik that the Cold War came to an end. It came with the fall of the wall and stuff a couple years later, but that was where the foundation fell.
Yeah. Well, I think when we left Reykjavik, the president was so disappointed because he had come so close to making a deal. And then Gorbachev asked for something that the president couldn't agree to. And that was to give up SDI, give up the
Star Wars.
Strategic Defense Initiative, which was the umbrella, that would bounce missiles off it so it would protect us. And that was under research at that point. And president wouldn't
That's a kind word, research.
President wouldn't give it up. But when he left, and everybody on the staff was so let down because we were that close. But looking back, a year later, that was the moment that the Cold War, I think, was won.
Well, most people would say too that at that time, everybody had framed U.S. versus Soviet as a military issue. Every president, from Truman all the way through to Carter. Reagan didn't. He framed it as an economic issue. So all of a sudden, when he put SDI on the table, and arguably the chances of achieving his goal were close to zero, if not zero. But the cost of playing the game, thinking poker terms, was so high, Gorbachev couldn't do it. And Gorbachev, during that meeting, said, in words that you could never imagine a Soviet premier ever saying, "Mr. President, I'll give you anything if you'll take Star Wars off the table." And President Reagan's reaction was?
He stuck to his guns.
He walked out.
He stuck to his guns and walked out. I would say this too, Tom. It wasn't just an economic issue. It was a moral issue for Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that's fair.
He really believed that they were an atheistic nation, and they would beg, borrow, and steal.
Do you remember what they messaged right after that meeting? Do you remember what y'all worked on?
We did not sugarcoat it. And then President was very clear that he was disappointed, that he came there for peace,
for a deal,
and left without peace in his hand. But by sticking to his guns and by keeping it going, inviting Gorbachev to Washington, that's what Tom was referencing, and that was the next step. And then Gorbachev invited him to Moscow. So they kept that relationship going, even though they didn't. A lot of people would walk away and say, "I'm not dealing with you anymore." We know leaders that would do that, but this guy, they kept it going. And then with Bush in the White House, the Soviet Union came down, and the wall came down, and Soviet Union dissolved. And it was a great moment in history.
Let's do baseball. So all of a sudden now, well, a couple things in between.
Fast forward.
But you get to be, as you talked about, the head of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Any kid that accepts and plays with and collects baseball cards has got to think that's the best job in the world.
It was.
And what was the job?
The job was to be the face of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so there were two aspects to it. It's the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. So there is the Hall of Fame, which is made up of, at that time, there were 220 Hall of Famers, 60 living, to be the person who creates the family of the 60 living Hall of Famers. And by the way, when I got there, they weren't much of a family. They came to Cooperstown once a year, saw each other. But you got to remember this. In those days, there's no interleague play. And there were guys that stayed in the National, Ernie Banks, National Leaguer his entire life, didn't know any of the American Leaguers really. I mean, heard about them, didn't know them. Al Kaline, American League, played for Detroit his entire career, didn't know any National Leaguers. The only time they kind of got to know each other was at that weekend, if they came back. And a lot of them didn't come back because Cooperstown's hard to get to. So I resolved at the beginning to make them a family. And we did things for them. I'll give you an example. Tom Seaver stayed behind after my first weekend and just wanted to coach me a little bit. He said, Dale, these guys are feeling a little bit unloved, that nobody's paying attention to them too much from Cooperstown, because the staff didn't know how to do this stuff. They just knew how to put on events. They didn't know how to build relationships. So he said, next year when they come here, do something a little nice for them. And by the way, I didn't wait till the next year. I traveled that winter to go to their homes and see Willie Mays in Atherton. And I had a lunch with Duke Snyder and Don Sutton and Eddie Matthews in Southern California, just to have fun with them together. And I'd travel the country to get to know them in their places, not when they came back to Cooperstown. So the next Hall of Fame weekend, underneath or on their pillow as they walked into the rooms was a watch. And it had the Hall of Fame logo on it with their signature on it. And you can't believe when they came down and saw me, they're like, Dale, that's like amazing. And we had a watch for their wives as well. Same thing, but a woman's watch. And a little gesture like that planted, after Tom Seaver planted the seed in my head, went a long way to all of a sudden changing the atmosphere and the culture. And I'll never forget Earl Weaver came down. I loved Earl. He came down, he says, puts his arm around, Dale, what time is it? He's looking at it like this. But it was just a small gesture, but that was just the beginning of a lot of things that we did to create a family. And I was really proud of that. So that's that side. The other side is the museum. And the museum needed to be updated and modernized. We needed to do some new exhibits because they were a little bit dated. And we actually made it bigger and modernized it. And then we decided a lot of Americans can never get to Cooperstown. So we're going to take an exhibit on the road. And so and this is an interesting story I want to share with you. So I needed to find a sponsor. And one of my board members is the former co-CEO of Ernst & Young. So I called him up. His name is Bill Gladstone. I said, Bill, any chance that Ernst & Young would be interested in this exhibit? He said, let's try. So he calls Jim Turley, who was his successor. Jim Turley was 45 years old at the time, St. Louis Cardinals fan, kid from St. Louis. So I go with Bill to the World Trade Center in late August of 2001 in one of those towers. And I meet with Jim Turley. And Jim loves baseball. He says, this is really interesting. He said, I'll get back to you next week. And then, of course, we all kind of knew what happened. Next week was 9/11. And so I called Bill probably September 20th, something like that. I said, Bill, I know that Jim is up to his eyeballs. I don't even want to call him and ask him, but I got to move forward. I got to find a sponsor. He said, let's just call him. So I called him, and Jim Turley, 45 years old, said, Dale, I can't think of a better time to sponsor an exhibit called Baseball as America than now. And they gave us the $5 million, more than anybody ever spent on an exhibit, a traveling exhibit in history. And that was Ernst & Young showing courage, showing leadership at that moment. And by the way, that exhibit was off the charts. It went to only the best museums in America, the Field Museum and Natural History in Washington and American or Nature and Science and so forth in New York. And twice as many people saw Cooperstown that way than went to Cooperstown during that period. And I was really proud of that.
So you touched on a couple of things. Would those be the accomplishments you look back on for those years at the Hall of Fame and take the most pride, the most satisfaction out of?
What I'm most proud of at the Baseball Hall of Fame is that we really professionalized the operation. We became something that nobody saw us as. We were a local entity before that, but I was being invited to speak at the National Press Club in Washington. I was speaking all over the country. I was visiting my Hall of Famers all over the country. We had traveling exhibit. We just raised the level. We raised the visibility of the hall beyond what it had ever been before. So I'm proud of that. I'm really proud, too, of the Negro Leagues.
Yeah.
And the Negro League study we did. There were 17 Negro Leaguers when I got there.
Walk us through that. That was a pretty significant achievement
Yeah.
in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. When I got there were 17 Negro Leaguers in the Hall of Fame. Cool Papa Bell and Satchel Paige, the big name guys.
Mhm.
And I thought when I got to Cooperstown, I knew a lot of baseball. And I did. But man, did I learn so much more. I mean, I learned about women in baseball, league of their own. Never knew. I grew up in the Midwest, never even knew that existed, okay? And it was a big deal. Never knew much about the Negro Leagues. Never knew much about that 95% of major leaguers went to serve in World War II, So all of that. And now I'm really learning the history of the game. And as I did that, I realized the ones that are most overlooked are the Negro Leaguers, because this was real baseball. This was not minor league baseball. I mean, these guys, look, after Jackie broke the color barrier, you can just look at who came into Major League Baseball. Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, who could not play in the major leagues before Jackie broke it. So the best players in baseball would have been in the Negro Leagues. And I thought, there's something missing here. So we devised a study, all these experts. It's amazing how many experts there are in the Negro Leagues. And I learned there's so many different Negro Leagues. There was Puerto Rican experts. There were Cuban experts. Orlando Cepeda's father was a great player. Perucho Cepeda could never play in the major leagues because he was too dark-skinned, kind of thing. And but there were writers for the Negro, they called them Negroes, and there's newspapers in New York and Philadelphia that covered Negro Leagues games. So we patched all this stuff together, came up with a statistical set that was 95% complete, and before it had been about 45% complete. And that was always the argument. You can never get the numbers. I said, we'll get the numbers. We'll figure this out. And then we had 95 nominees at the beginning. We narrowed that down to like 50 and then down to 18. And in 2006 on Induction Sunday, 18 more Negro Leaguers were inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we doubled the number in my time there, and I was really proud of that.
As you look back on that, Dale, clearly you assume that if those 18 had been able to play, they would have been in it.
They would have been stars.
But how many of the 50 do you think would have been in the Hall of Fame if they had had the opportunity?
Oh, good. That's a great question. I just don't know. But clearly the Negro Leagues was a very, very high level of baseball, and guys that could have played in the major leagues.
A lot of successes, but you had a big controversy. Probably goes back to your White House days, to be frank with you. Presentation on the 15th anniversary of Bull Durham?
It was.
Bull Durham, Baseball Hall of Fame is going to do a special event in that. Then you end up sending a letter to the two stars of the movie.
Yeah.
Walk us through that. Walk us through your experiences and walk us through what you got out of it.
Yeah. Most painful moment of my career, I would say. And I made the mistake simply from inexperience. I mean, it's amazing how you become a better leader after having gone through experiences, right? So, like every CEO, I was busy. I had stuff going all the time, and I was trying to get this done, get that done. I had my checklist of things to get done. And a couple people on my board mentioned just randomly, we're not going to let those guys come up here, are they? They like hate President Bush,
Well, at this time,
we had gone into Iraq.
We had gone into Iraq, so we were at war. It was early on in the war.
And they were out protesting against the decision to go into Iraq. And my younger self back then, listening to board members, I thought, okay, well, there's one more thing on my list. I'll get this letter going. And to be perfectly honest, in hindsight, I was part of the Bush echo chamber. President Bush, big baseball guy. We were coming to the White House a lot for his T-ball games. I'd bring Ozzie Smith and Dennis Eckersley with me one week, and I'd bring Joe Morgan and Johnny Bench the next week, and we were tight, right? And I thought, this is easy. We'll defend the president. And I didn't realize that I was representing a public entity that was where Democrats and Republicans are fans of baseball and fans of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and they don't appreciate taking sides in things like this. And so I can't tell you the number of letters and just virile letters that would come in. And I got letters on the other side too, but I kept them all.
Well, and Kevin Costner came out against you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He was not one of the focals of the two, but he eventually came out against you.
And I deserved it.
And it was cloaked in a freedom of speech democracy.
Yeah.
And I deserved it. And I deserved it looking back on it. I didn't enjoy it. I'll tell you a funny story. So our house was right across the street from the Hall of Fame. And so Ann is in the middle of this too, because she's only known me she's never known me to be a controversial figure.
Right. Divisive.
And so I'm in the shower in the morning, and she's reading me the letters to the editor in the local Cooperstown paper, railing against me. And I would tell her, Ann, I can't hear you. I've got my fingers in my ears. I don't want to hear that. But it was a funny moment. But I can laugh about it now, but it was a painful moment.
Yeah.
Okay, take us to Dallas.
Cool. You then come to the Texas Rangers, a very different baseball job. Now you're in a single organization. I think you're the executive vice president of marketing. Talk to us about how that happened. And ultimately, what did you do to increase the brand awareness of the Rangers locally? Yeah.
I got a call from Nolan. Nolan Ryan had just become the new president of the Texas Rangers. And he calls me up and he said, Dale, that town getting a little small for you and Ann now that the kids have graduated. Because our kids were, in high school there. We went to all the events and he was right. I mean, that town kind of shrinks up a little bit on you when your kids aren't involved anymore. He said, look, I'm down here. Why don't you come on down here and be my executive vice president of marketing?
And this is 08, 09, correct?
This is 08.
Yeah.
Yeah, 08. So we did. We came down. And by the way, we bring Ann's mom with us. Ann's mom was living with us in our house in Cooperstown. We had a 3-story home, a federal-style home. The top floor was her own apartment. So it was a beautiful setup for us. So we bring her down here with us. She's a gamer. She's going to be 100 years old, by the way, in October.
Wow. Still
lives next door to us. And I just love her. If my mom is here, my mother-in-law is like right there.
Cool.
I mean, I've known her all my life. I love her, but she comes down here with us. But I come down at a time when Tom Hicks is fixing to sell the Rangers.
Yep.
I didn't know that, to be honest with you, at the time. So it's a difficult time. I'll give you an example. We were in the old ballpark. And our offices are on the 4th floor, and the hallway leading down to the executive offices had framed posters of all the great players of that team. So it was Michael Young and Ian Kinsler, and so we would trade a player, and I would say, hey, we got to change that thing up. And they said, can't do it. I said, why? I said, cost. I said, how much does a frame cost? They said, $50. We're not doing it. And so it was that tough.
Yeah, it wasn't just selling; it was bankruptcy.
It was that tough to work for that team at that time. And the other thing was, I don't think I got the real experience of working for a major league club because there was so much uncertainty. There was so much nervousness. I loved going to the games. Nolan and I sat in the front row, watched every game together. I loved that part of it. We talked about everything, right? I'll never forget. I'll tell you one story. We're watching a game. We're playing the Mariners. And he turns on to me. He says, Dale, who do you think is the best third baseman in baseball? I'm going through the American League East. I'm going, in my mind, it's right in front of me. I'm going through East, American League West. So I come down to 2 or 3 players. He says, I think he's right there. Points to Adrian Beltre. And we're going to get him. So
that worked out well.
It was those kind of fun things that I remember from working with Nolan. I love Nolan. But the fact is, it was an uneasy time working for the Rangers as they were preparing to sell. And then, of course, the new team came in. The new ownership group broomed us out. And so it was a unceremonious way to leave baseball. But I love my time at baseball, and I'm very close to the Rangers. Ray and Neil treat me great. They invited me to the White House with them when President Biden gave the team the World Series trophy a couple of years ago. So I'm close to the Rangers still. I'm on the foundation board.
Cool.
So
Dallas, DRC. Talk to us about your transition ultimately to the regional chamber and what a CEO of a regional chamber just does for audience who may not have any clue. What's your day in, day out?
Okay.
Obviously, we discussed you build relationships with CEOs, but go deeper than that, setting vision for the city and the business environment, et cetera.
Okay. I'm going to take you back to 2014, and I get a call from my friend Talmadge Boston, who calls me in Los Angeles. We were living in Los Angeles at that time. I worked for 2 years for Occidental Petroleum, doing government relations, toughest job on earth, being in California and being a government relations guy for an oil company. And I was not enjoying myself very much. I mean, we enjoyed LA, but tough job. So Talmadge calls me up and said, Dale, Ambassador Oberwetter is leaving as president of the chamber. And what do you think about coming here and doing that? And I said, what does the chamber do? I had no idea. So I called my buddy, David Bechtel, who I knew was close to the Milwaukee chamber president, Tim Sheehy. I said, David, tell me about a chamber job. Dale, that's like the coolest job. Tim has tickets to the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, whenever he wants them. I said, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. Now I got interested. But so I did get interested, and Ann and I we always loved Dallas. Our daughter graduated from SMU and stayed here. It would be a chance to get back closer to her. We had friends here, loved the community, loved the can-do spirit, the feel-good spirit here. And so threw my hat in the ring, and they chose me. I think they chose me because they knew I was pretty good in the community, pretty good relationship builder, knew how to raise some money, and had a lot of experiences to draw on. And so came back and took over that job. Didn't really know what I was getting into, to be honest with you. And really knew that Dallas was a hot market, but had no clue about how hot a market it was. And sometimes you're lucky, right? I mean, you got the wind at your back. So I get there, and again, I think we needed to really professionalize the staff. That was the first thing I took on, because we needed some work in that way to be seen as a professional operation. And then just building. And one thing that I was really proud of is we got the big companies in town involved with the chamber. A lot of them were sitting on the sidelines, didn't think the chamber could help them much. So in 2018, I asked John Stevens, who was the CFO of AT&T, if he would be the chairman of the chamber, and John said yes. The next year, Chris Nielsen of Toyota said yes, and we were off and running. All of a sudden, all the big guys wanted to play with the chamber. And so during my time here, we had a fantastic team, and I'll give a lot of credit to Mike Rosa, who is our Senior Vice President for Economic Development.
That's great.
With Mike Rosa,
He's great.
we helped attract 350 headquarters to move here. Now, some of those were proactive, where we went out and said, you need to be in Dallas, not California. And some of them were reactive. They were well down the path of looking at Dallas. We just had to convert them once they got here.
First one, almost when you got here, was a small little auto company by the name of Toyota. So that was almost the start. But since then, it was McKesson, Caterpillar. I mean, the numbers during your reign were pretty significant.
Yeah.
With all the work that the chamber does, and again, involved in education, quality of life issues, promoting the city, bringing companies in, economic opportunities what do you look at or look back on and say was the biggest contribution of the chamber to the health and the success of this region?
I think the chamber became the go-to organization for a lot of things. People would say, chamber can get that done. And that goes back to the professionalization of the chamber, because we hired really good people, really smart people, and we knew how to run an organization to empower them to do their jobs. And so all of a sudden, the events we put on became much more professional and well attended. We had many more offerings for people. We we're very cognizant of wanting to be inclusive of everyone in this community and empowering everyone in this community. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of focus on Southern Dallas County and making sure that when people were coming in, talking to Mike and his team about economic development, that they were shown Southern Dallas County and the workforce there and the property opportunities there and so forth. And we just wanted everybody to feel like they were part of this, nobody left behind. Education, of course, is our workforce, our future workforce, very, very important. Really proud of what Dallas ISD has done to raise the standards and to improve the outlook. They got a ways to go, but man, they're probably the model for every urban school district in the country in terms of improving quickly. And you can give Michael Hinojosa credit for that, Stephanie Elizalde credit for that. And our team worked closely with them, along with Todd Williams and Abby Williams and all those great people. So I think in some ways the chamber leads, in some ways the chamber is, comes alongside you. In some ways it
cheerleader.
It boosts you, kind of thing.
Again, a lot of things, as you said, the wind has been our back the last 10, 15, 20 years. Those successes, clearly good place to be, no income tax, that helps us. We've got land, central part of the nation. We're fortunate to have DFW. All those things are great.
Gosh, you could have been a chamber president, Tom. I think you were as the mayor.
I was. I actually was chairman of it at one point. But now I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you, to use a baseball term. How much of our success, though, when it comes down to it, is not just the positives on our side, but the negatives that have evolved in California, the tri-states especially, but throw Illinois in there too.
Sure.
How much has that been a factor in our success?
I think you could make a baseball analogy here and say, look at this young shortstop for Pittsburgh right now. Okay, he's starting in Pittsburgh. He's not going to end up in Pittsburgh. He's showing what he can do, but he's going to outgrow Pittsburgh. And the Yankees are going to come after him, and the Red Sox are going to come after him, and the Dodgers are going to come after him. The teams that win, or the teams that have money, resources, are going to eventually get him, right?
That's going to be 9 years now.
Yeah, I know. They were smart to lock him up. But the same is true for business. So, those companies start off in the Bay Area, or they start off in Southern California, or they start off in New York. And eventually they're going to say, that was good at the beginning, is not good for us now. Where is it good for us? Dallas. Dallas has got the population. They've got the Fortune 500 companies. They've got the critical mass. They are forward-looking. They've got a bright future ahead of them, and it's sort of limitless. And so I think there's some of that goes on. We do win because others lose, but we gotta be ready to take them too.
But if we lost that spirit, like I think back to Tom's op-ed that he wrote in the Dallas Morning News 3 or 4 weeks back, and he really laid out these parallels between our current city council environment and what we're thinking about doing downtown, with things that have gone on in those states and those regions called over the last decade or two. We lost that spirit in this city to go be agile, be quick, be business-minded, and be focused on actually attracting the right talent and companies to be here?
Yeah, well, I think when I think of Dallas, I think of the Dallas region, because that's what I worked in. So if one wins, we all win. I think that Dallas has tremendous potential. But I think they need to align some things. I do think Linda McMahon was a great choice to lead economic development, because I think for a long time they were losing out on some opportunities where Plano was much more organized, Frisco was much more organized, Irving, Richardson. But so I think that if they can really if Linda can organize it in such a way and they have the political will to make some decisions that make it attractive to come to Dallas versus some other places, then I think Dallas can win a lot. But I think we're in some ways a little bit different region than a lot of places in that the city is not everything here. I mean, we have a fast-growing Collin County. and it just kind of spreads as far as you can see now. Yeah.
Well, but take the region. We're the fastest growing GDP any place in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Will be the third largest market in the space of a couple of years. It won't take very long before we pass Chicago. Everything looks great. From a regional standpoint, what can get in our way? Is it the grid? Is it transportation? Is it water? Is it education? What are the things out there? And you did it for 12 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What worries you
Yeah.
that could turn this all around?
Yeah. I think you mentioned all the right things, power, water, education, transportation.
Which of those worries you the most?
Gosh. What I worry about is that we don't keep up with it, and because we know they're coming. And I don't want to wake up 10 years from now and say, Dallas used to be a great place to live.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much anymore.
But
and so
is
I
that
think,
a question of complacency and attitude, or is it a strategy question?
I think it's a matter of educating people and giving them a sense of urgency during a period of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's so comfortable to live here now. It's a great place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to see that the future won't be as comfortable if we don't do these things. So it's the political will. And the political will only happens if you sell it as, if we don't do these things, then it's not going to be as great as it is right now. So I think that is, there's always the complacency issue with everybody. And so, we got to let people know if there's no water, there's no Dallas, or there's no region. If we don't have power, there's no region. And, the data centers now are taking up a lot of water, taking up a lot of power. And as we get more people moving in, so there's a lot of stuff going on right now. But if we don't have power, if we don't have water, if we don't have educated kids, and if we don't have a regional transportation system that truly works for everybody, then I think it's...
Do we today?
No. I love DART. I think DART's a great idea, but we can do a lot better professionalizing DART, making sure that it works for the suburbs.
What do you mean professionalizing?
Well, I came from Washington, D.C., where we had, the Metro. People that live in the Bay Area have BART.
Mm-hmm.
People that live in Boston have the T. Those are professional transportation systems. I mean, they're going to show up on time. They're going to be full because people have trust in them and want to ride them. What the schedule is. That you can afford them. And I see DART trains riding along empty. That doesn't feel very good to me. I think we can do better. And I'm not throwing water on anybody. I just think we can do better.
Fascinating.
Well, Dale, we've raced through 50 years plus. As you look back on your career, and again, very interesting because of so many different type of experiences, what do you look back on and want your kids and your grandkids to know about that speaks of you, who you are, and what you're about?
Yeah. I don't think about that very often. But one thing I do think about occasionally, I look back to the Reagan years. And a lot of the people that I worked with then were the same age as me. And for them, that was the high point of their careers. It went downhill from there.
Mm-hmm.
They just kept trying to hang on. They try to get into the Bush White House, then they get in the second Bush White House, then they get in the Trump White House. They're just trying to hang on. And I didn't do that.
There's a lot of that.
I knew that Washington was not my ultimate destination. It was a stopping point for me. And I think what I'm proudest of is that I kept growing. I kept learning. I kept putting myself in uncomfortable situations that were unfamiliar to me, but learned them so that I could add to my body of knowledge. And as a result of that, I've lived an interesting life. And hopefully I've had a good impact on a lot of people along the way. And really, if I could leave this world saying I did that and I was raised a great family and great kids who are great parents to their kids, which is what they are, then I'll feel pretty satisfied.
That's great. Fantastic.
Terrific.
Cool.
Dale,
Okay.
thanks for
All
being
right.
with us. We've sure enjoyed it.
Thank you, Tom. What a great time with you guys. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Again, today's episode is sponsored by Clay Cooley Automotive, a family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years.